All right, let's start with a bit of a thought experiment for you, the listener.
Gotcha.
How would your life change if you woke up tomorrow and your identity wasn't something you simply possessed?
You mean like a list of traits you carry around?
Exactly. Not a set of static traits or your job title or the property you own, but instead something you had to actively practice
Every day.
every single day. Something that was maintained, renewed, and defined entirely by the quality of your interactions with everything around you, human and this is key, non-human alike.
That one simple philosophical shift.
Yeah.
Just moving the focus from self-possession to universal connection. It fundamentally reconfigures reality.
It changes everything.
Everything. It changes how you view a mountain, how you eat your food, how you approach a conflict in your community, and even how you think about death.
Right.
It moves the entire framework of existence away from this idea of the solitary self and toward the comprehensive web.
Exactly. And this deep dive is for you, the learner, who is looking to grasp these kinds of complex foundational ideas quickly, but, thoroughly. We've synthesized a heavy stack of documents here, all of them analyzing the core philosophical patterns, the deep, enduring family similarities, as the sources call them, that are present across a huge diversity of North American indigenous cultures.
And that diversity is the first thing we have to underline.
Yes.
Our mission here isn't to catalog every single belief system. That would be impossible and, frankly, disrespectful.
It would take a lifetime.
It would. The mission is to understand the shared logic that seems to operate underneath many of those systems.
And we have to start by just acknowledging the immediate difficulty here, which is really a problem of Western perception, isn't it?
It is. There's no single monolithic Indian religion or unified belief system. It's just not a useful concept.
So we're not listing dogma.
No, not at all. It's more like we're trying to decode an operating system. These sources, they cover dozens of distinct nations, languages, geographies, but they reveal this stunning coherence in their philosophical approach to life.
Which leads right into the problem of categorization that we've sort of inherited from Western philosophy. These boxes we use.
Like nature, religion, myth.
Politics? They just fail when you apply them here. They don't fit.
They fail because they try to segment what these philosophies see as entirely inseparable.
Can you give an example?
Sure. You take religion. In this context, it's often thoroughly interwoven with ethics, with medicine, with politics, with daily practices like hunting or farming. You can't just put it in a separate compartment and study it on its own.
It's not something you just do for an hour on a Sunday.
Exactly. The sources really emphasize that these concepts aren't abstract symbols you study in a textbook. They are part of a lived reality.
Lived, yeah.
So when you try to isolate nature as, say, a silent backdrop for human activity, you fundamentally miss the point.
Because that backdrop isn't a backdrop at all.
No, it's actually a mitwelt, a living co-world with which one is in constant existential and necessary dialogue. That's a key piece of scaffolding we need to understand right from the start.
Okay, so let's unpack this central thread then.
Yeah.
The philosophical gravity well that seems to pull all these ideas together.
Right.
The central idea that's woven through all of these sources is what the analysis calls the logic of relationships.
In the original German of the deep analysis we reviewed, the term is Bezogenheit.
Bezogenheit.
Yeah, and it's a bit tricky to translate perfectly, but it basically means being in relation.
So the state of being connected.
It's a state of being connected. It posits that everything, literally everything, is understood not as an isolated, self-contained object defined by its own intrinsic properties,
but as a node in a huge, comprehensive, dynamic web.
Exactly. Its identity is its position in the network.
That is a radical starting point. And our goal here is to explore how understanding reality as this net of connections changes our foundational understanding of self, place, time, and ultimately truth.
Because if relationship is the bedrock of existence, then everything we normally take for granted, ethics, knowledge, power, structures, it all has to be totally reevaluated.
Right. Everything changes.
Yeah.
Let's start then with the self, the relational self. That's the foundation of ontology, right?
It is.
In a lot of modern Western thought, the individual, the ego, is the starting point. It's the autonomous, self-directing unit.
I think, therefore I am.
Exactly. But the sources we reviewed suggest these philosophies turn that completely on its head. They lead with the relationship.
They do. So identity is less a set of intrinsic properties or traits you carry inside you, like, I am intelligent or I'm ambitious, and more what the source calls a state of relation or verhaltnis.
A state of relation.
Who you are is the sum total of how you stand in connection to everything else.
That sounds extremely fluid. And honestly, potentially destabilizing to a Western mind that's built on autonomy.
It can be.
If I'm defined by my relationships, to my clan, my neighbor, the river, the ancestors, then who I am is constantly being shaped, refined.
And potentially challenged.
Right, challenged by those connections. So my identity is inherently interdependent, not independent.
Precisely. And this is why we have to analyze the profound foundational meaning behind that often cited phrase, all my relations.
Okay.
The sources are so emphatic about this. This is not just a polite greeting. It's not a sentimental sign-off on an email or a romantic flourish.
It's an ontological statement.
It is a declaration about the fundamental nature of reality itself. It literally says, I am because I am connected. The I is an outcome of the we.
Wow. Okay, so if that phrase is the declaration of existence, what does this web actually include? You can't just be my immediate family or community.
No, it is absolutely comprehensive. The sources detail the astonishing scope of this web.
So beyond human relationships.
Oh, far beyond. Yes, it encompasses the essential human relationships, family, clan, community, but it expands immediately and fundamentally into the non-human world.
So we're talking about
animals, plants, the waters, the wind, the stones, the stars. They are not background elements. They are active, indispensable components of your identity.
And crucially, it also incorporates the temporal dimension, which I think often gets forgotten when we talk about identity.
That's a huge piece of it, the connection to the ancestors who came before, who provided the knowledge and the life that sustain you today.
And the responsibility to the future generations who are yet to come.
Right. It's this vast four-dimensional tapestry of kinship.
To really solidify how radical this contrast is with the Western autonomous individual, let's go back to that analogy you mentioned from the source material.
The one about the thread.
Yeah, the thread.
Okay, so think about the difference between a single thread just lying loose on a table. It's isolated. Its definition is pretty limited. It is a string of cotton. That's about it.
Right. But take that same exact thread and weave it into a complex tapestry, a blanket, or a traditional garment.
Now its identity is completely different.
It's entirely defined by the thousands of other threads it crosses, the colors it complements, the structural strength it contributes to the whole pattern.
You can't pull that thread out without fundamentally changing the entire picture. You can't understand the isolated individual without understanding the web that holds them.
The profound takeaway here, then, is that identity isn't a property you get at birth and just have.
Right. It's not static.
It becomes something one practices through constant, ethical, and respectful interaction.
It is maintained, not simply possessed. This practice, the quality of your relationships, that's what determines your role and meaning within the entirety of existence.
Let me push back on that for a second, just to clarify. We in the West often define respect as a moral choice. It's a good thing to do, but it's optional. But you're suggesting that for these worldviews, respect is not optional at all.
Yeah.
It's practical.
It's absolutely practical. The shift in the starting point from the isolated individual to the connected node has immediate, necessary, and inescapable ethical consequences.
Okay.
If the world is a living web and you are defined by your inclusion in it, then respectful interaction with all the components of that web is not merely a moral nicety. It's not an added layer of politeness.
It is a fundamental form of realism.
That's the word.
Realism. So living disrespectfully isn't just being mean. It's being illogical. It's being out of touch with reality.
Precisely. Who, living within this relational framework, could possibly act as though the world is silent or passive or disposable? It would be insane.
Yeah.
If everything from the cedar tree to the lightning strike is potentially a relative, then treating them as a mere resource to be indiscriminately extracted isn't just immoral in some abstract sense.
It's self-destructive.
It is. It's illogical and ultimately suicidal because you're damaging the very foundation of your own being and your own survival.
This leads us directly to the next radical concept, moving beyond the human sphere. And this idea, the expansion of personhood, is maybe the most radical divergence from Western legal and philosophical tradition.
That's a big one.
Here's where it gets really profound. The concept of personhood is absolutely not restricted to humans. That is the fundamental difference in where you draw the boundary of what counts as someone.
And this expansion is often the sticking point for outsiders because our entire legal and economic system relies on that hard line between human and non-human, between subject and object.
Right. A person has rights, an object doesn't.
Exactly. But in this worldview, the criteria for personhood are based on things like dignity, influence, and the capacity to relate, to interact, to provide gifts, and to require a response from you. It's not based on biological species.
So we see that animals are viewed as independent counterparts. Sometimes they're seen as older and wiser than humans.
Certainly not just biological species or objects of study. They have their own agency, their own nations, their own importance.
Right. And similarly, plants are regarded as beings with their own dignity and their own voice.
And as the sources clarify, voice doesn't necessarily mean language in the English sense.
No, it means influence, signs, observable responses.
They're certainly not just raw material to be consumed without acknowledgement. They are entities you have to negotiate with.
And this extends powerfully to the geographic world, to what we would typically call the inorganic.
Right, to the things we see as just there.
Geographic features a specific mountain, a vast lake, a particular river, a sacred spring. These can be deep carriers of memory and meaning and power for a culture.
And because they possess this inherent agency and significance, they acquire the status of a person or a relative.
They are emphatically someone rather than something.
That's the key distinction.
So if the mountain's a relative and the river has a voice, this means we aren't living in a silent, passive, natural backdrop that we call nature.
No, we are living in that midwelt, the co-world, a dynamic, living sphere of constant interaction.
So your identity isn't shaped by you just staring at the world as if it were scenery.
No, it's shaped by you engaging in a continuous, lifelong dialogue with it.
This is where we need to spend some time analyzing the language we use, because it can be a minefield.
It can. The sources actively caution against using older academic terms like animism to describe this philosophy.
Why is that?
Historically, that term has been used by outsiders to imply a kind of naive belief system or a generalized spiritual infusion of objects. It has this colonial baggage that suggests irrationality or superstition.
That makes a lot of sense. It's reductionist. If I say a river is animated, I'm still implying that the river itself is fundamentally inert and something else was added to it.
Exactly. You're still starting from the wrong place. The sources suggest that the term relationality, that Bezogenheit, describes the worldview far more accurately.
Because it's not about what is spirited.
No, it's about recognizing that the core reality is the relationship itself. The mountain has dignity because of its relationship to the community, because of the history it carries, the water it provides, the life it sustains.
So if we accept that framework, then respect and attention are truly fundamental forms of realism.
They have to be.
If you understand the mountain as a relative, you don't exploit it indiscriminately, not because of some distant moral code you read in a book.
But because that relationship is essential to your survival. It's a practical necessity.
And the practical consequence is that the land, specifically, has its own memory and its own voice, its signs, its rhythms, its resistance, its gifts.
Right, and an individual's identity is shaped through constant active interaction with this living subject.
Which means that a person is never truly independent or isolated. You are literally formed by the specific soil and water, the specific winds and storms that sustain your particular place.
So the idea of just moving somewhere else and retaining the exact same identity becomes logically impossible.
You've ripped yourself out of the web that defined you.
That's right. Your kinship network has been destroyed, and you have to begin the arduous, sometimes decade-long process of building a new one with the trees, the rivers, and the non-human persons in the new place.
And that speaks volumes about the trauma of displacement, doesn't it? It isn't just a loss of property, it's a loss of self.
It's a kind of ontological violence.
Let's turn our attention to, well, the heavens and the earth, to cosmology. Because when relationship is paramount, time and space, they stop being these abstract concepts you measure with a clock or a map.
They become dynamic relatives themselves. They have character.
We see this profound contrast with the standard Western concept of time, which is, what, linear?
Linear, driven toward relentless, straight-line progress. This idea that the further forward you go, the better things inherently become, and you just leave the past behind as something primitive.
Right, the ladder of progress.
The ladder of progress. But here, indigenous ideas of time are often rooted in a rhythm or a cycle.
And this isn't a simple rejection of history.
Not at all. It's a profound orientation toward renewal, regeneration, and continuity. This cyclical view includes all the immediate natural rhythms, the waxing and waning of the moon, the seasonal shifts,
Animal migrations, life phases.
and the constant observable cycle of growth, decay, and return.
The circle, as the source points out, is an incredibly powerful symbol here, whether it's implicit in the social arrangement of a meeting place or explicit in a dance.
It reflects the essential need for regeneration. The world is not a machine that just runs down over time. It's a living system that must constantly be brought back into harmony and balance through ritual and careful action.
And if that cycle breaks, if the salmon don't return, if the bison don't move, the entire web suffers catastrophically.
It's a crisis for the whole cosmos, not just an economic problem.
It's important to stress, though, that this cyclical view doesn't mean history is ignored.
Oh, absolutely not. Memories of trauma, displacement, alliances, historical breaks, these are often intensely present and central to cultural identity.
But the underlying rhythm, the philosophical foundation, remains renewal, not this constant straight-line progress that just justifies throwing away whatever came before.
And this view of time works hand in glove with the view of space.
Okay, how so?
Space is not abstract, empty area to be mapped, measured, and possessed as property. The concept of land is the primary origin of identity, of knowledge, of responsibility.
It functions as a relative.
In the purest sense, it is the essential provider. The individual knows who they are because they are shaped by, they care for, and they speak a particular landscape through stories, names, and rituals that trace their ancestry back to that very place.
You are tied to the specific soil under your feet.
This takes us to a really fascinating point the sources make. The specific landscape actually shapes the group's entire metaphysical outlook.
So land dictates metaphysics.
Yes. Think about the profound differences in necessary knowledge and worldview. A northwest coastal culture centered on the seasonal return of the salmon, a predictable, massive, vital resource. They will structure their thought, their ethics, their celebrations very differently.
Than odd plains culture centered on the movements of the vast and unpredictable bison herds.
Exactly. The land provides the temporal rhythm, the ethical necessity, and the spiritual framework for existence.
So if you live in a forest defined by slow-growing cedar, your relationship with time and resource management will be fundamentally different than if you live on the arid plains where survival is precarious and nomadic.
The geography isn't just setting the stage.
It's writing the script.
That's a good way to put it. And this grounding in place leads directly to a core epistemological conclusion. Situated truth.
Situated truth, what does that mean exactly?
It means knowledge is not seen as universally abstract, like a formula that applies everywhere, independently of context. It is profoundly situated. It arises specifically from living in, caring for, and long-term observation of a specific location.
This means that truth is tied to duty.
Inseparably. The source clearly states that knowing a place creates a duty of care. The elder who can predict the drought based on the sound of the wind or the behavior of the creek isn't just a repository of data.
They're the repository of responsibility.
The knowledge and the responsibility are one and the same. Who you are is defined by the responsibility you carry to ensure that the land and water remain healthy for those who come after.
And finally, even the way the cosmos itself is ordered is related to space and place.
Yes, the cardinal directions, east, south, west, north. They function as far more than mere geographic compass points.
They provide a structural, spiritual, and existential orientation within an ordered cosmos. They create a framework for life's journey.
And though the specific elements, colors, and animals assigned to those directions vary significantly from region to region,
the commonality is the impulse for orientation, the need to know where you stand within the great circle.
if we connect this back to the beginning, if the world is a web, the directions are the framework that anchors that web, allowing you to move through it purposefully.
It's an ordered cosmos, not a random universe.
Exactly.
We make that crucial transition from metaphysics and cosmology to the practical application of it all. Ethics.
How you live.
How you live. If reality is a comprehensive web of relatives, how do you live in it without destroying the fabric?
The answer is through the continuous practice of maintaining harmony and balance among all relationships.
So ethics aren't defined by, say, a written checklist of external moral imperatives like the Ten Commandments.
No, it's defined by the ongoing adaptive process of keeping the equilibrium within the web, and the entire system rests on one core operational principle.
Reciprocity.
Reciprocity.
Which is a constant two-way exchange.
Yeah.
Taking and giving, receiving and answering, utilizing and protecting.
And this isn't just an occasional thank you. This manifests in both small gestures: a prayer, leaving a specific gift, acknowledging the sacrifice, and in large, complex social structures like kinship systems.
The sources highlight that because food is the most direct and necessary connection between the cosmos and the human body.
The act of eating becomes inherently ethical.
It's described as cosmic bookkeeping, a literal accounting required for what you take from the living web.
This translates into strict, often complex rules surrounding hunting and gathering. This is so far from casual consumption, it involves a deeply ritualized exchange.
Like asking permission from the animal or plant entity.
Giving profound thanks for the life that's been taken, taking only what is absolutely needed for survival.
And adhering to the strict banning of waste, a profound taboo.
Let's take that example of the taboo against waste, because it really crystallizes the philosophy. Imagine a hunter in a plains culture, completely dependent on the bison. If that hunter takes the life of a bison, uses the hide and some of the meat, but just leaves the rest to rot.
They haven't just been inefficient.
No. They have committed a major ethical violation against the bison as a being that willingly gave itself. They've broken the fundamental contract of the web.
So what are the consequences?
They become unreliable. The animal entities, the sources say, will cease to provide themselves because the human has proved unworthy of the gift. The consequence is not just moral guilt.
It's starvation for the community.
Exactly, the realism of it.
That shifts the entire burden of proof onto the human. In some of these narratives, the animal or plant is depicted not just as passive prey, but as a being that voluntarily gives itself.
Which doesn't lessen the need for thanks. In fact, it places the burden squarely on the human to prove themselves worthy of that gift, and to use it respectfully to maintain their end of the bargain.
The ethical mandate extends to rituals that are designed to constantly reset that balance.
Right. Practices like first fruit ceremonies, the duty of sharing resources and hospitality, seasonal fasting or feasting, they are all expressions of the same underlying logic.
That life depends on the lives of others.
And this dependence demands a response, a ritualized and grateful answer, not just consumption.
The plant world is equally important as an ethical and spiritual teacher here.
Yeah.
The source specifically mentions maize in some cultures serving as an axis of world understanding.
How so?
It teaches about the slow, seasonal rhythms, the absolute necessity of dependence on others, the community working together to plant and harvest, and the patience required for cultivation.
And the plants themselves are understood as sophisticated co-beings whose gift demands responsibility.
Which leads us to a crucial point regarding contemporary interactions. Knowledge itself is bound by these ethics. Knowledge about medicine or plants is not abstract data. It's a gift from the plant. Therefore, one cannot simply take it or say it or sell everything about it.
This is a point the sources explicitly make. They contrast this philosophy with modern desires for a freely available buffet of indigenous wisdom or traditional ecological knowledge.
That desire itself is seen as another form of extractive behavior.
Even if it's veiled in spiritual or academic language.
Right. I want to learn your secrets.
Yes. But the knowledge is inherently tied to a responsibility to protect its source, to use it for communal health, not personal accumulation. Taking the knowledge without taking on the responsibility for the plant, the land, and the community is a profound violation of reciprocity.
It's theft disguised as curiosity.
That's a powerful way to put it.
Shifting to social ethics.
Yeah.
How does this relational logic structure the human community itself?
Well, status is achieved through generosity and responsibility, not merely through possession or the accumulation of wealth.
So wealth is expected to circulate through the community.
Exactly. And hospitality is recognized as a central duty. It all reflects the logic that a strong web depends on all its knots being cared for and connected.
And this relational ethic extends powerfully into the temporal dimension, which is essential when we talk about sustainability.
Right. So what does this all mean for the distant future? The principle of temporal foresight or long-term vision is key.
And we see this most powerfully articulated in the famous 7 generations idea, which is prominently mentioned in Haudenosaunee contexts, though the pattern of deep-time foresight appears widely across many cultures.
It's an essential principle. It states that decisions made today must be evaluated based on their impact on descendants 7 generations into the future.
7 generations is roughly, 140 to 200 years?
Something like that. And this isn't just a nice thought, it's a policy mandate.
It means decisions regarding mining, forestry, water use, or war must be made so that the land, the water, and the community are preserved.
And whether you count exactly 7 generations is less important than the commitment to deep time thinking, to having a moral competence measured in centuries, not just quarterly reports or election cycles.
But let me challenge that for a moment. How does a philosophy built on harmony and reciprocity deal with the inherent conflict and necessary violence of, say, warfare or internal disputes? That seems to shatter the harmony of the web.
That's a crucial question. The sources show that even in conflict, the ultimate goal is not necessarily annihilation, but the reestablishment of equilibrium, even if the short-term actions are violent.
And internally.
Right.
Within the social order.
Internally, the relational framework means authority is based on experience, demonstrable responsibility, and the proven ability to harmonize relationships within the community, not just raw power or dominance.
That shifts the definition of a leader. A leader isn't the person who issues commands.
No. They're the person who has the capacity to bring people back into alignment.
So the system emphasizes consultation, consensus building, and the balancing of roles.
Often including very strong female institutions that hold authority over land use, agriculture, and kinship. The ultimate goal of governance is always equilibrium within the web, ensuring that no single node becomes dangerously dominant or isolated.
Let's shift our focus one last time to epistemology, how truth is acquired, and how identity persists beyond a single lifetime. Indigenous epistemology differs so markedly from the Western focus on, say, clinical measurement and abstraction in a laboratory.
It's a different way of knowing. Knowledge is gained through experience, intense attention, long-term observation, and active relationship to the co-world.
And the sources state simply and powerfully, knowledge is inseparable from responsibility.
Right. If you know how the salmon run works, you are responsible for regulating the fishing to ensure its continuation.
If you know which plant heals, you are responsible for its protection, its cultivation, and its ethical deployment.
You cannot have one without the other. It's a package deal.
And because this is an active relationship, legitimate sources of insight are much broader than just empirical data, as we define it today.
Yes. Dreams and visions are often considered legitimate, even vital forms of communication with the wider world.
They aren't considered random fantasy or the product of indigestion.
No, they're treated as serious, culturally framed attempts at communication from the co-world, from relatives, from powers, from ancestors.
And they're sometimes sought individually through practices like vision quests, fasting, or sweat lodges.
And sometimes ritually framed and interpreted by the community. But they're always aimed at achieving clarity for a specific personal or communal task.
So when we talk about evidenced relationship, we aren't talking about a laboratory measurement that can be replicated anywhere in the world.
No. Truth is an experienced relationship that requires action. Something shows itself to you in a dream or a pattern in the weather.
And one must respond with an ethical act. Knowledge is fundamentally a demand for action.
This is deeply related to what the source calls embodied knowledge, or verkörpert.
Embodied.
Yeah. Knowledge is learned through doing, and it's anchored in the body. It's practical, immediate, and learned over decades of apprenticeship.
So this includes reading subtle weather signs.
Recognizing faint tracks in difficult terrain, handling plants respectfully during a harvest, understanding the nuances of fire for cooking or for ceremony. It's not abstract data stored in a cloud. It's a living capacity anchored in the person.
To give a tangible example of that verkörpert knowledge, think about someone who lives by the sea their whole life. They don't just know the tides from a chart. Their body feels the tides. They read the changes in the wave patterns, the smell of the air, the cloud movement, and their feet are constantly adapting to the subtle shift in the sand.
That knowledge is literally embodied in them.
And this leads to another crucial insight, the critical utility of silence, still.
Right. Silence is not the absence of communication, nor is it a vacuum. The sources argue it's an active technique of perception.
How so?
The constant background noise and constant talking we engage in, they suggest, drowns out the voices and signs of the co-world.
So becoming silent is how you wait for the world to answer you. It's how you perceive the movements of your relatives.
It's a mental discipline designed to listen to the web. That's a profound shift for us, where we value constant contribution and noise.
Absolutely. Finally, let's contextualize death within this relationship web. If identity is a knot in a vast, continuous web of kinship, then death is not an absolute cut or a null point, the end of existence.
It's a transition to another status within that relational network.
Grief remains profoundly real. The temporary absence of that specific beloved person is agonizing.
Of course.
But that grief is embedded in a larger continuity. The deceased remain a vital part of the community as memory, as a name that's passed on, as a role model, protection, or as a presence encountered in dreams and signs.
They haven't left the web, they've simply changed their state and moved to a different domain of the web.
Many traditions speak of the soul's journey after death, often symbolized by paths like the Milky Way.
And the afterlife is often seen less as a geographical location of reward or punishment, and more as an ordered space, a continuation of relationships, or a necessary return to the source of life force.
We also see the idea that something specific returns. Names, character traits, spiritual continuity in the family line is an experienced concept that strengthens the community.
But the sources caution that the Western term reincarnation is often too mechanistic or individualistic.
How is it different?
It's more about the flowing of life through lineage, ensuring that the relationships that define the self continue to manifest in new forms across generations. It's the continuity of kinship, not just the continuity of a single individual soul.
We have covered a vast amount of ground in this deep dive, synthesizing how diverse Indigenous worldviews redefine core philosophical concepts based entirely on this logic of relationship, this Bezogenheit.
To summarize the profound philosophical shifts we've covered, let's look one last time at the core contrasting patterns that form this coherent, relationship-based worldview.
In ontology, the contrast is just stark. Isolation versus relationship.
The starting point is not the autonomous individual, but the knot in the web, defined by its connections.
In cosmology, it's abstract space and linear time versus situated place and cyclical rhythm.
Land is not a resource. It is a relative and the anchor of identity and knowledge.
For time, it's the idea of relentless, straight-line progress versus a commitment to rhythm and regeneration.
The philosophical impulse is cyclical renewal, demanding constant maintenance of balance.
In ethics, the opposition is extraction and indiscriminate use versus reciprocity and harmony.
The foundation is cosmic bookkeeping, giving back what you take and ensuring generational continuity through concepts like the 7 generations.
And finally, in epistemology, we contrast abstract data and possession versus embodied responsibility and experience.
Truth is situated, learned through doing, and demands immediate ethical action. Even death itself is seen as a necessary transition, not an absolute null point.
The sources offer a wonderful final analogy for you, the listener, to really internalize this profound perspective shift.
It's the difference between a tourist and a gardener.
Think about the tourist. The tourist sees the land as something external, something to consume for pleasure, take pictures of, and then leave behind. Their identity is independent of the place.
They stand apart, viewing the scene, expecting the land to serve them.
But the gardener is fundamentally defined by the garden.
Their hands carry its soil, their schedule is set by its rhythms and cycles, and their well-being is intrinsically tied to the health of the plot they serve.
If the plot withers, a fundamental part of the gardener's identity, their capacity, and their survival withers right along with it.
And we can apply this analogy to our modern lives. The difference between treating your community, your workplace, or the local environment as a resource to be extracted from, the tourist mentality,
versus seeing it as a living, continuous network that requires constant input, care, and attention, the gardener mentality.
The ultimate insight here is not to try and adopt this worldview as a romantic saving religion, as the sources caution against.
No.
The deeper, more actionable conclusion is to recognize the core truth embedded in these philosophies. Reality fundamentally consists of relationships, and every single relationship, whether it's with your family, your neighbor, or the water you drink, demands continuous maintenance and dedicated care.
That is realism.
That is realism.
So this deep dive leaves us with a necessary challenge that spans all fields of action, from environmental policy to our own personal conduct. If our identities and our actions are constantly measured by whether the world, the human and non-human co-world, can sustain them.
What changes do we need to make today to shift from being a tourist to being a gardener?
The ultimate posture presented in these philosophies is profound in its simplicity.
Live so that the world can continue to answer you. Go forth and consider the quality of the relationships that define your own web.